Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the ad break. You are still watching Prime Live. Up next, we have with us, the renowned tech journalist, Brendon Petersen, and he is here to discuss the exciting advancement in smartphones. And, from improved battery life to enhanced durability, smartphones are constantly evolving to, better serve our needs. Now, Brendon will also share his insights on how these changes are impacting the industry and what we can expect in the future from the very smartphones that we're talking about. Now, thank you so much for joining us, Brendan, on Prime Life, and welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell us, what you think are the most significant improvements in smartphones over the last few years?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I think some of the things, people might not find that exciting because I think one of the big sort of improvements is when it comes to performance and efficiency with the chipset that powers these devices. We've got a phone just released yesterday, potentially coming to South Africa before the end of the year, called the Oppo Find X9 Pro, which is the first one to use the MediaTek Dimensity 9500 chipset, and that's using a 3 nanometer process, what they call an all big core design. And really, what all of that means, all that design means for us as sort of general people from the public is apps are going to open faster. You're going to have less lag when you're playing games, when you're doing anything, when you're doing video calls, and less battery drain when you really are pushing that phone to its absolute limit. But other than that, we've also got battery and charging. So we've got sort of next gen battery materials like silicon carbide and silicon carbon anode batteries, and these are offering sort of higher density, faster charging batteries. So another phone just announced actually on Metro FM just the other day, the Honor X7D. That phone has got, I think it's a 6,500 milliamp hour battery, which is bigger than that in a foldable phone, but it's the same size as, any standard phone. It's not gotten any bigger. So you'll be getting batteries that are, offering essentially more power in the same size battery, which means you're able to use your phone for far longer between charges. Then there's also durability and build quality. And I'm not talking about, premium materials. We've heard about ceramic glass, we've heard about titanium. I'm talking about phones that actually survive NOx drops, water, dust, and extended use. X70 is a perfect example of that, with military grade drop protection. So we've got phones that are actually now standing up to everyday usage, without costing you more because something like an X7D is not a flagship phone that costs you over 20,000 Rand. This is the phone that starts at under 4,000 Rand. We've also got now better cameras, better sensors, and a lot of companies are now actually including, sort of accessories as part of an option where you can attach a lens to your phone, like a camera.
Mm.
And then obviously the form factors are changing, as well as the display experience. So, before we would have phones with a lower sort of refresh rate, and also, if you're struggling to sleep and all the blue light and the flickering of the phone that we don't necessarily see but impacts all of these things, all of those things have been upgraded now to make these things more friendly to your eyes, to give you form factors that change and evolve. Because we've seen, standard bar phones, we've seen the flip phones, we've seen the folding phones. Samsung has shown off the triple fold overseas in Asia. Huawei's got the second generation one that they've already launched in China, and now there's rumors of a phone that folds four different ways. Four different displays, so quad fold. So all of these things. We speak about some of these things like the quad fold being maybe sort of gimmicky, solving a problem that doesn't exist, but things like the durability, things like the longer battery life, those are future proof. Those are actually solving problems that we are facing today. So it's making phones more reliable, more future proof, more capable of doing things that they couldn't do just 2 years ago.
Mm. Most definitely. And I want us to just jump into, the battery life. Or how do you see the battery technology evolving in the future? Because currently, I feel like I don't know, when it comes to the battery life, it feels like the more smarter the phone became, the poorer the
Yep.
battery life became. So, like, do you see that evolving in the future?
You've hit on something very important there, and it's not your imagination. As more of these phones are packing in AI and all of these smart features, that's exactly what's happening. You've got the same amount of battery sort of capacity, but because you've now got things that use more battery power, AI, even though it's being done in the cloud, still takes a lot of battery power.
Mm.
As companies are looking to potentially move it to on device, that's going to take even more battery power. So yes, that needs to evolve, but there are innovations there. Silicon carbon batteries, I think, are the biggest sort of evolution that we've seen. Because up until now, look at your Samsungs, your Apples, your iPhones. Those are all still using traditional lithium-ion batteries, whereas now these new silicon carbon composite batteries, mostly used by the Chinese companies. So your Oppos, your Honors, those sort of companies, your Vivos as well. What they're allowing the companies to do is essentially, it's like having a cup of coffee, the same cup of coffee that you normally have, but they're able to fit essentially more coffee into that cup than they normally would have been able to do in the past. The Oppo Find X9 Pro is a very good example of that. Just launched Barcelona yesterday, as I say, potentially come to country before the end of the year. That's got a 7,500 milliamp hour battery. And if you look 2 years ago, 7,000 milliamp hour batteries were things you only ever saw in a tablet. I mean, to cross over 5,000 milliamp hour batteries was unheard of. I know overseas in China, Honor has phones, topping the 8,500 milliamp hour, size, and the phone hasn't changed in physical size. There's talk of companies trying to push 10,000 milliamp hours. Those are phones that are going to last you, on a single charge, easily last you the entire weekend. So instead of charging every night, you can now charge every second day, every third day, obviously depending on how you use it. So that's definitely something where we've seen a massive, massive improvement. And I think the other side is also faster charging, and smarter charging. Because the other thing we keep saying in the industry is, one of the things that degrades your battery is heat. So while people love wireless charging actually creates a lot of heat, and it's a lot of wasted energy. That's also why Apple created MagSafe. It aligns the magnets, so you losing less of that charge, and you generating a little bit less heat. Um, so, heat destroys your battery. So now what we're getting is faster charging. We've seen companies top 160 watts. Some companies trying to push for 200 watts, which is great. But again, that generates a lot of heat. So now they're pairing it with smarter charging where, you can plug your phone in, and after your phone starts learning your habits, it knows, for example, you always wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It'll charge to 80%, and then say half an hour before you wake up, it'll do that last little bit of charge so it doesn't overheat the battery, slows down the degradation. So I think those are the two biggest sort of things that we're seeing, is the type of materials used and the fast charging with that smarter charging thrown in.
Mm. Now, with all of these advancements that you just mentioned, how do you see them impacting the way we use our smartphones, and also what impact will they have in our daily lives?
We've spoken about, or we've touched on AI in this
Mm.
conversation. We've spoken about it before.
Yeah.
I think the companies are pushing towards us not using our phones the way we traditionally did, but more sort of speaking to our phones. So you can say the wake word and then ask it a question instead of having to hold it to your ear type of a thing. So I think that's definitely going to be impacted by just the general sort of shifts in technology. I think the more efficient chipsets, I think the better batteries are going to help that. But I think really what it's going to do for everybody is, longevity is going to equal value, because I've always said that value doesn't have to be the cost of a device, making it sort of more affordable. It has to be, no matter what I'm spending, I'm getting value for that money, whether it's 1,500 rand, 15,000 rand, or 28,000 rand. I've got to be getting value for that money. And I think now if you're able to hold onto your phone for longer, and it's still able to keep up and do all the things for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and it's surviving, you know that occasional drop, and not just sort of the occasional drop that we do now, but like significant drops, onto tar out of a second story window, that sort of thing. If it's surviving all of those things, or sort of real world scenarios, then that to me is value.
Mm.
Because what we do with our phones now is not just, phone each other, send messages, send memes. Those are definitely things we do. But people are doing businesses with them. They're starting businesses out of their houses. Using their phone to accept payments. They're using their phone to get orders. And if you don't have to worry about that device failing you, if you know that that device is going to last you 2 years, 3 years, whatever it's going to be, it gives you more time to focus on that business. It gives you more reassurance, so that this is not another expenditure I have to go and sort of worry about when I'm trying to do something else, whether it's studying, whatever it might be. So there's reduced frustration. There's obviously that reliability, and then eventually when you do decide to sell it, because it's a stronger device, the battery lasts longer, you're going to get a little bit more money, when you go and sort of sell it to someone else, or you take it in for a trade-in or whatever. So I think, all of these things actually do translate for the first time in a long time to real practical, advantages for the user.
Mm. Most definitely. And, I want to speak about, how the smartphone, like the affordability side of it, because also we do know that also as much as they putting all these advancements, they come at a price. Do you think that there will ever come a time where smartphone manufacturers can balance innovation with affordability?
I love this question so much. You don't understand, because this has always been one of my big things. And I actually sat with one of the sort of up and coming smartphone companies in South Africa and around the world, and had this very conversation with his CMO, because a lot of these innovations, the AI, the durability, the bigger batteries, always come at the sort of more expensive devices. What we're seeing now, and I can say this in South Africa, is that is actually not the case anymore. A
Mm,
lot more of this innovation, other than the folding phones, but the battery technology, the durability, the faster charging speeds are actually coming in at the more affordable devices. There is a phone not yet released in South Africa, so I won't say the name of it, I won't say which company it is, but they're looking at bringing in a phone into South Africa under 2,000 Rand, looking at potentially the 1,500 Rand price mark, which is going to have the durability features that we just spoken about, which is going to have, the bigger battery, the faster charging than anything else we've seen in that price range before. They're not the only ones who are looking at that. There's a lot of companies now who are actually focusing on the more affordable sort of end of the spectrum, and trying to make sure that people who are spending, under 2,000 Rand, maybe even a little bit lower, are not being left out, because we still want to be able to empower these people. And I think finally people are starting to realize that in South Africa, that's the demographic that matters more than anybody else. It's not the person who can afford, the 48,000, 50,000, 75,000 Rand phone that matters. It's the person who can afford the 2,000 Rand phone and under. That's who you need to win over. And even if it means they're going to keep that phone for longer, it doesn't mean that they deserve less, which I think unfortunately we've seen for too long. So that is actually happening. There are some announcements coming from a couple of companies towards the end of this year, very early in next year into January, actually all around this. So it is definitely happening.
mm. And let's speak about smartphones adapting to the needs of like different user demographics. Let's speak about seniors and gamers. And especially when it comes to seniors, because I'm very worried that if it's
Mm.
the advancements are happening too fast. We have a generation that might not be able to keep up with the advancements. So, do you think that the smartphone industry is actually doing something to accommodate them?
This is a very challenging one, because I've actually written about this a few times, and it's not just the seniors. I was traveling a couple of months ago and was sort of in and around South Africa, and I went to sort of more of the rural areas, more of the
Mm,
farming communities,
mm,
where the way of life is very different to I think it is for many of us in the cities. And yes,
yeah.
you need a phone, but they're not using it the way we're using it.
Mm,
And the advent of this technology, 5G is still rolling out to a lot of these places. Fiber internet is still rolling out, brings such a big change, because it brings so much of globalization to these places, and it takes away a lot of the magic and the charm, and also that way of life, the traditions and all of these things. And it worries me when I look at how fast technology is advancing, when people aren't educated enough to be able to deal with how fast it is, because I think even we are struggling.
mm,
um, it's a hard conversation, because companies will tell you they're doing the things, but at the end of the day, the objective really is how many customers can we get.
mm,
So I think it is also a fine balance, because yes, there is a responsibility from their side to, educate and empower people, and they'll say, oh, we've got these features, for seniors, for example, there's a simple mode. Everyone calls it something different, where it's only certain apps that they can access, that they, might need, like a WhatsApp phone, that sort of thing. The icons are bigger. All of these sort of things are more adjusted for certain people, and that helps. But when you put AI, yes, AI can help, but also we know AI hallucinates, and AI can lead you down the wrong path. So how do we educate people around that? So that's where the challenge comes in, and I don't think that's just down to the manufacturers of these devices. I think that's a more concerted effort across the industry that should be happening. So it should be your networks, it should be, your Googles, your Apples, from a software perspective. We make the operating system for this, so we should also be teaching you. But also, Google, because of Gemini, Microsoft, because of the investments into ChatGPT and the AI built into their things. I think we should see a concerted effort there, and I don't think enough companies are doing enough. One or two are trying to do a couple of things, but not enough people are doing it. You touched on gaming. I know again one of the companies are looking at bringing in a couple of very specialized gaming devices. and the price points that they're looking at, and again, I can't say what it is, but the price points they're looking at are making them, if they are able to get away with the price point that they want to do, would make it more affordable than I think any gaming phone we've ever seen in the country. And because of the power built into it, you don't have to just use it as a gaming phone. You could use it as a normal phone if you wanted to, that just happens to have, X amount of ridiculous power built into it. So there are a lot of these conversations happening behind the scenes. We're also seeing companies like Techno, which is huge across Africa. They pretty much dominate the African market, sort of looking at how do we adjust our sort of position and perception in South Africa. And they thrive at the more affordable but powerful devices.
Mm. Most definitely. Unfortunately, Brendon, we have run out of time, but thank you so much for sharing your insights and for always educating us on, all things tech and what we can expect when it comes to the smartphone industry and the advancements that are going to come with it. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are welcome. Viewers at home, that was Brendon Petersen, who is our renowned tech journalist, and we were discussing the future of smartphones. But